Well, good Monday morning. Thanks for joining us. I'm Marlon Bowling with you, your tour guide to the ag commodities. I want to welcome aboard the one and only Brian Hoops, president of Midwest Market Solutions. We have a lot of stuff to chat about here this morning. All right, Brian, we had the big rally overnight, as Tammy alluded to a little bit ago in the broadcast. And now you say we have some breaking news regarding sales of U.S. grains. That's always a big deal. What do you hear this morning?
Good morning, Marlon. Yeah, coming out of the weekend, sometimes you don't have a lot of news, but of course, what's happening with Russia, big news event, given the prices a big jump overnight. There was a private export sale announcement this morning. That was 121,000 soybeans sold to China. So a couple cargoes, usually it's a kind of considered routine business, but it's been a long time, 3-4 weeks since we've seen any export sales. And last time we did was in our new crop variety and put last week's exports at a pretty good number. So we're off to a good start as far as an export sale announcement for this week. Love to see more sales on the books here as we go into our harvest timeframe. But I think the big news is really what's happening overnight with Russia, the Ukraine, and then also forecast turning hotter and drier through early part of August than what they were compared to Friday.
I keep thinking back to several trading days ago, and, we were talking about they had attacked the Odessa ports for like 4 or 5 days in a row. And everybody says, don't worry, they'll ship it by rail to the west, or they'll ship it out on the Danube River. They're building up their ports on the Danube. They'll just go out that way. They said, you don't have to worry about Russia bombing that. Apparently they said, "Niet," and they did anyway. So I guess nothing is off the table there. That really puts a crimp in marketing plans when you have stuff like that going on that you have no control over whatsoever.
And this port is, one of the major key export regions. It has a capacity of about 2 million metric tons of grain exports per month. So it's one of the major ones, maybe one of the last major ones that they were expecting to push some grain through. So it really escalates the tensions, or shows that those tensions are escalating. And it leaves Ukraine with really no other export channels other than by rail across country, which will definitely slow things down considerably. So they are still able to move it by rail. But as far as shipping things out of ports and regions, there's not many options left on the table for them, because this apparently hit 2 different export terminals or facilities, and it is going to significantly curtail any export activity. So I think that's why you saw the wheat futures, corn, soybean oil really pop overnight, as those are the markets that are going to be most affected.
All right, so on my limited capacity brain, that tells me that Ukraine is not going to sit back and take that they're going to probably counterattack Russian ships. I mean, doesn't that stand to reason?
You would certainly think so. Russia seems to be getting a little bit more aggressive in their outreach with what's happening. So you would think that we're going to see escalations rise here. These tensions are, as I mentioned, really increasing. And I think retaliation is probably the next step for the Ukraine, if they're going to keep up this war effort.
Oh, I hate it when countries get food involved in the mix, when they go back and forth and the ag community gets caught in the middle in all the crossfire. Let's take a look. Let me see. Let's bring up the corn market overnight and see what the prices actually did end up doing. As we wrapped up Globex here a little bit ago, we actually had the September corn 21 higher at 548, and December up 20 at 556 and a quarter. It was quite a night. In soybeans, we had the September 19 3/4 higher at 1448 3/4, and November soybeans were up 16 1/4 at 1418, but that was off of its high by about 6 cents in the overnight trade. Then you get to that wheat market, and oh boy, here we go, Chicago. September 41 1/4 higher at 738 3/4, and even that was 7 cents off of its high of the overnight trade. Man, we're collecting some massive ranges on this wheat trade here lately. In Kansas City, you have September at 897 3/4. Oh, pretty close to $9. It got as high as 902, but closed just under $9 at 897 3/4, which was 37.5 cents higher. In Minneapolis wheat, you had September closing 35 higher at 922. What about the weather, Brian? How much impact will that have?
Yeah, we started off a little firmer overnight, and I think that was us pricing in some of the weather models that did turn drier through the weekend and into early part of this week. Friday when we went home, the dollar was rallying and kind of had a risk-off mentality along with a little bit wetter forecast. So we priced in a lot of that dryness already, I think, in the early part of the overnight trade. And then when we surged higher while most everyone was sleeping, that was what was going on with the Russian news of the attacks.
Okay, well, let's come back in a moment and we'll discuss the latest in our livestock trade. We have a lot to look forward to on the open there as well. We'll discuss with Brian Hoops right after this. All right, we're back talking with Brian Hoops of Midwest Market Solutions. He is in Springfield, Missouri. By the way, did you catch any rain over the weekend or not, Brian?
Hardly anything, but a lot of warm temperatures, and this forecast for this week is going to be hot and dry for this area.
Not the greatest conditions for cattle. I think I was reading yesterday that some of the heat indices over in the high plains, southern high plains, might be above 120 this week. Is that right?
Yeah, it's going to be a stressful week for livestock. So, you may see some cattle trying to be moved early in the week before the heat really gets here later in the week. But I would imagine that all efforts will be to keep those cattle alive and well conditioned through the middle of the week, and very little movement on actually trying to move those cattle on a truck to kills facilities.
I know Tony St. James was telling us last week that he knew of cattle producers out there in the southern plains that were putting up giant shading structures, and that's probably a really good idea these days. It's going to be really intense. All right, talk to me about the makeup of the cattle market as we head into today's session. How do you think it'll react to the cattle and feed numbers that we had Friday and that semi-annual cattle inventory report that came out?
Yeah, it's a lot of news for the markets to digest, and cash trade did end up better, probably $5 higher on a address basis, $2 or so, both in the north and the south on a live basis. But these on-feed numbers coming in pretty much across the board above estimates in the on-feed and the placement categories, a little bit below numbers in marketing, so a little bearish in all three categories. Most of your weakness is going to come in those months that would be affected by the increased placements. That's the second consecutive month above year-ago levels. So you're looking at, December, February, probably October, all under some early pressure this morning. August should be pretty well supported as we continue to see tight supplies up front. But that longer-term inventory report did tell us these numbers are tight and really not going to change significantly anytime soon. So I would expect we'll see some buying interest or support stepping in, but then you throw in corn being 20 cents higher, it could hurt some feeder cattle prices very early in the morning. The first hour of trade or so before we find some support.
So, okay, trying to interpret these numbers, if you look at a placements number that's that much above what was expected, and it was about 5 points above expectations out there. I mean, does that mean that if you're putting that many young cattle into feedlots that you're pushing back the rebuilding of the nation's cattle herd for breeding purposes even further than what we would normally?
Yeah, most likely a lot of these cattle were taken off pastures a little bit early because of dry conditions in some areas because of the heat and put into the feedlot earlier. So yeah, you're taking away one aspect, and that's the rebuilding of the herd and replacing it with animals being in the feedlot. So these are going to be younger green cattle. It's going to take them some time to get to marketplace. So, that's why I say your February is probably going to be the ones that are going to be hurt the most following this report. But November feeder cattle, January, probably, I think, be decently supported after we factor in the higher corn prices and some of these numbers, because it's going to take that much longer to rebuild that inventory.
And we headed into the report with the live cattle lower. The feeder cattle were a little higher, led by the deferreds, and lean hogs Friday were mainly lower across the board. October down 47. Thank you, Brian, for explaining everything. Appreciate that a lot. Brian Hoops, and he's with Midwest Market Solutions, and he's in Springfield, Missouri.